Hey Matthias, how are you?
Good. Hi. Thank you. I'm very good. How are you?
Matthias.
Hello.
Where are you at right now?
I'm in London. I'm actually in our office, right next to where Kol is located and where the Kol Mezcaleria is located. And yeah, just it's closing of the day. We have 5:30 in the evening here. I guess in your place it's more in the morning right now.
Well, yeah, it's midday for me. Juliana's in LA, so it's yeah, early. What is it,
9:30
like
here.
nine something? Yeah.
9:30.
Okay.
All
Good
right.
morning.
Good morning. Thank you.
Yes,
All
I'm about to
right.
go for a drink after, and you have a coffee.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah, weird world. Um, so how did you first get into mezcal? Let's start there.
I think I started bartending around 12, 13 years ago. And being in like the spirits industry and being in the bar industry, I think you're getting exposed to mezcal, tequila, but obviously mezcal as well, then quite pretty much straight away. Um, Even though back then in Europe 12 years ago, so that was like 2012, it wasn't that much available, right? You had like a couple of brands. You had, I don't know, brands like Del Maguey was available. You had, I don't know, maybe like some illegal or so, but like not like much variety. And then obviously like time ticked along, working in bars, always like seeing here and there some mezcal, but like it wasn't like I didn't work in any like agave focused or mezcal focused places until I moved to Paris, which was in 2019. And I started working for a group called Quixotic. And they have a place called Candelaria in Paris. It's quite like a mezcal focused and tequila focused bar. I've worked for another side of their business. So I worked in another restaurant, like which was much more sustainability focused and French spirits. But there I got like much more exposure to agave spirits in general. And like we had like lots of chats and like did like work across the group and consulting things and stuff like that as well. But then really, really exposed to mezcal. I got pretty much when I then moved back to London to work with Santiago, who I met through a mutual friend. And then for us, luckily, we had COVID and a COVID break. So we had a lot of time to spend learning about mezcal and tasting and reading and talking to people and exposing ourselves to like everything agave focused. And yeah, that was like basically the last 4 years I spent at Kol in the Mezcaleria, in the restaurant, and just spending a lot of time learning about agave spirits and learning how much I don't know about it.
So in Candelaria in Paris, I don't know that one. How 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 long has it been around?
Oh, that's been around quite a while. I think Candelaria
Okay.
is around, well, let me lie, but like I guess more than 10 years,
Okay.
probably like 12, 13 years. It was the first bar they opened back then. And one of the first, if not the first, agave bar in Paris. And it's still around. It's like, I think it's in the 50 best bars as well. They're doing a great job and they always have a great agave selection.
Okay. I mean, that has to be one of the first, if not
Yes,
the first, agave bars in Europe, right?
in Europe as well, yes.
Okay.
So basically, I think Paris always, or like, I mean, like always is the wrong word, but like in the last, had like much earlier than lots of other places in Europe, had a quite strong mezcal community because it had a quite strong Latin American community as well. So you have quite few agave focused bars in Paris. You have Le Mescaleria as well, and Candelaria, and then some other places where like there's definitely more mezcal than in other places.
Hmm.
Um, in London, you had a much stronger tequila community with like Cave Pacifico, which is from Thomas Estes and Tequila Ocho. Um, and then mezcal really caught up over the last, I don't know, 3 years, 4 years. And now like accelerated a lot and suddenly you have like so many different agave places. And obviously London is like compared to the rest of Europe, always much closer to the US in terms of trends and what's happening. So agave is like really picking up and you see it everywhere and mezcal bars are opening and tequila bars are opening. And it's it's definitely like quite the hype around it currently.
Yeah, I mean it's happening really fast. Like I can remember like when mezcal first kind of came to New York, and that was like 15 years ago, and then it was like, like one bar opened. I forget what, like Casa Mezcal or something. I think that was the first one, or one of those places, and it just like snowballed and exploded, and it's been like and I see how it's like spreading around Europe, around like I see in Asia, like there's mezcal all over the place, and I was in South Africa, a few weeks ago, and like
Amazing.
suddenly there's like people are importing mezcal, and
You
it's
even have
like,
mezcal from South Africa, like agave spirits
oh
from
yeah,
South
yeah,
Africa.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I heard of that too, and yeah, it's strange that it's not strange. It's just like it's kind of surprising that it's like it's happened
Yeah,
so quickly.
I think it speaks for the. I mean, I think it's like a thing of our time now, but it's also, I think it speaks for the fascination and for the. I mean, also for the flavor, obviously, but also like just like passion of the people and what agave and what agave spirits are about. And like I think in general, Mexico is quite like a hot, very cool country right now. So I think that even like from Europe during COVID, lots of people went to Mexico. Right now, it's like it's quite trendy country to be in. Like not
Yeah,
only agave spirits, but also when it comes to food, when it comes to culture, when it comes to I don't know partying and everything.
yeah,
Obviously, that was like in the US much earlier the case, and now it's like picking up with like I mean travel is like as easy as it ever was, right? But also it's just more accessible and like it's just like a cool country right now to be in. So a lot of people travel to Mexico quite regularly. But then I think mezcal is just like a thing of like availability. So you have much more distribution now in the UK, you have much more distribution in Europe, and you have more and more educated guests. I think I spoke to someone else a few months ago, and then I said that I think that in the US you still have more educated guests and educated drinkers when it comes to mezcal, which like then he quite heavily disagreed with me. And he said that like probably in the real like knowledgeable people, it's pretty much the same, like relative the same amount as in Europe. It's just the general knowledge that agave spirits exist and mezcal is made from agave and is from Mexico is probably more spread in the country. But that like really like the differences between the different agave variations and the different in production and so on, there are probably also not that many people who actually really know about that,
yeah.
as it's here the case. But yeah, I think availability is just much, much bigger these days. And it's a really fascinating spirit, not only flavor wise, but just like to discover. And like there's so much story behind it. It's not, I think like compared to like a spirit like gin or vodka, there is so much more because like you have so many different agaves, you have so many different production methods, so many different people. Like it's like very, very small production. It's like just like
Yeah.
really, really fascinating. It's like, and I think as soon as like, if you're into spirits, as soon as you like get connected to agave spirits, it's very difficult to stop and like say like, it's not for me.
Yeah. No, I've never heard anyone say that. Like, that's like they have like
Yeah.
start drinking mezcal. And yeah, it's not for me. No, it's like everyone kind of just like falls into that.
I think it's quite a quite
spiral.
dangerous rabbit hole.
Yeah, it can be.
Because and there's so much to learn and like there's so much to discover and like you think like, oh, now I learned a little bit and like I know a bit more, and basically the next step is like that you have the feeling I don't know anything anymore because everything you can start question everything, and then you start basically from scratch again, it feels like, and you're learning about like the different states. And then like obviously like legally it's also a tricky topic, which like kind of like probably almost helps that like, oh, what is mezcal and what is agave spirit and what is tequila and why some people can't call it mezcal and what's happening now and regulations, and there's so much mystic around it that it makes it like really, really like such a fascinating spirit.
So there is this trend now. Like it's undeniable. It's like worldwide, and but there's also dangers in that. I think, I think we're becoming more aware of those dangers. I mean, I don't go to Oaxaca that often, but I've been, a few times and kind of spread out over the years. So it's like I've seen just like changes in the way mezcal's being produced and things, and and like you can now see these kind of like these monocultures of like espadín and things where that never used to be the case, and it's like rather than sourcing from the wild or from like agave from milpas, it's being grown in these kind of like plantation style you know plots sometimes, it's in all these international brands are coming in, and they're putting pressure on the distillers to produce more and more, and then they lock them into these contracts that are strict who they can sell to. So I'm curious like how you can source a mezcal in a way that doesn't just kind of turn it into tequila or something like that. You have to do it very carefully. I know you guys do, but it has to be quite a challenge.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like two questions, right? Like one thing is what's going on in Mexico and what are the issues there, and then the other thing is like how we approach it and try to like work our way around it. And obviously in Mexico, I think lots of people saw what went wrong with tequila and why it went a certain way, and like why like I don't know, additives are allowed, and like that amount of additives is allowed as well, like 1% is crazy, and why like suddenly like they're pretty much only big brands, and what happened to all the small producers, and there's monoculture, and agave is either too much agave or like too much blue weber agave or not enough agave, and agaves are sick, and yeah, all these issues obviously that we have in Jalisco and the other tequila producing states. And I think to a certain extent, as you said, you can definitely see it in Oaxaca as well, that like there's lots of monoculture when it comes to espadín, but you basically can't find any tubala anymore. You can't find any Arroqueño currently. Also like unripe agave is getting harvested, and like obviously lots of bigger brands pushing into the market, or lots of like brands with like fresh money pushing into the market, producing in very different ways, or even worse, like exploiting like the small producers and like don't pay them properly or don't give them any type of like ownership, like just exploiting them. Obviously, on the other hand, you have lots of other states as well where still it's more or less intact and not as broken. And you have lots of like small producers over there who like pretty much like still do what they did like 150 years ago and produce for their friends and family, and like pretty much untouched from any industrial products and brands. How we approach it ourselves is that what is really important for us is transparency. So with any brand that we stock, with any mezcal that we work with any like batches that we buy, for us, what is really important is that we know as much as possible about it, but especially that we know about the producer. So I think there are some quite well-respected brands out there as well. And then you ask who like actually produced it, and they either can't tell you or don't want to tell you. And like the liquid might be quite good, right? It's like maybe like a good mezcal, but like I think for me the most important thing is actually the person behind who produced the mezcal, and like their story and how they got into it and what they're doing. And I think that's like the really, really fascinating part about mezcal as well. It's like this like personal connection of the mezcalero and the agave and the spirit that comes out in the end. It's not just about like a tasty product. I think there's so much more, and so much more passion and knowledge and tradition behind it. So basically what we're trying to do is to know as much as possible about the spirit. We know that we know the producer, that we know what they're doing, that we know how it has been produced, where the agave comes from, the varieties of the agave, why they do what they do. And then obviously as well that it's a tasty product. I think it's sometimes very difficult to say, especially for like us. I mean, we're sitting here in London and I'd say, oh, that's a good mezcal, and that's not a good mezcal. I think there are mezcals that I like and they're better, and that I like maybe not as much, but if it like follows certain criteria and certain like ground rules that we set for ourselves, and like in terms of like ABV and like transparency and just telling a story, right, if you like, even like, normally we say if the mezcal is like below like 44% or so, there's probably something like a little bit wrong with it. But that's more like, because sometimes it's really difficult to actually understand what's going on. If you give me a coherent story why this mezcalero trying to do these and these things for these and these reasons, and that's why the agave spirit that he produces is a low ABV, maybe I say, okay, that makes sense to me now. So like basically what we're trying to find is just like as much transparency as possible and as much connection to the producer as possible, which then led us over the last years. So what we learned is that it's actually getting more and more complicated. Maybe like because our standards that we set for ourselves over the last years, they changed a bit as well. Like we were always quite strict, but obviously are definitely stricter now than we used to be 3.5 years ago when we first opened. With then figuring out for ourselves that obviously there are some brands that are producer owned, like brands like La Locura, Rey Minero, Rey Campero, Rey Zapoteco, but these are pretty much the only 4 producer owned brands available in the UK and available for us. So then there are other ones that you find in Mexico, but you have to import it yourself, which you can do to a certain extent, but obviously that's like much more tricky. And then we said, okay, that was one of the reasons why we decided to import our own spirits. And basically we buy small batches from small producers and then release them under our own brand, under the Kol brand. And like have like, we always had it from the beginning, and now we focus on it even more than before. And we just launched 6 new ones in, when was it, middle of April, I think. We're basically working with a partner who's in Mexico, travels around and helps us sourcing those batches, and then meeting him, tasting them, deciding on what is good, like really trying to showcase as well, like as much diversity as possible, as many different agaves at many different states as possible, and like a bit like the real mezcal in a way. So not only like what sells well, like not only like, oh, we have an Espadín from Oaxaca that is like big body and smoky, but like everyone expects, but also like the other side and like other flavors of agave spirits, and like be different, bit like a different topic and a much bigger topic again. But like we basically moved away quite a bit from single variety agave spirits, because I don't really believe that that's like the traditional and real way of producing mezcal. That's much more like, for us as with a Western drinking culture, it sounds really fascinating, or like a single variety mezcal, and that's what you're looking for, right? So you can really taste the flavor of this one agave. But much more normal and much more natural is that like the mezcalero goes out and like harvests the agaves that grow together, that are ripe at the same time, and then makes a distillate for his friends and his families, and they share together. And I think that's like much more the true flavor of mezcal, and like much more the true flavor of this, like this moment or this season, and trying to focus much more on that. Yeah. So basically, gathered and collected our own batches, where it was really important for us to like showcase diversity, transparency, and much also like a story between all them. So like if you have like a mezcal flight, it does really make sense and try to give you like a full picture. And then the third one that the third mezcals that we are getting, besides the other 2 that I mentioned, so besides producer-owned mezcals and our own ones, are from brands where we have like really strong connections to, that we know really well, where we know, okay, that we trust, like brands like Netta, for example, brands like Paloma, that go out and buy from small producers, they buy small batches, that are really, really well sourced, that can really tell the story of the people behind it. But yeah, it definitely got, the higher your standard, the more difficult it gets, especially if you're quite far away from Mexico, and limits the amount of mezcal and agave spirits that you're working with.
Yeah, Matthias, I was going to ask you about that. How often do you travel to Mexico? I bet it's not easy because you're in charge of the bar. But at some point, it seems that even if you trust your partners, and the people that are gathering information for you, and about the producers, the stories, obviously the mezcal. It looks like you and having to interview them to get the story of that other, the producer. So how do you go about that? And if it's in the end flavor, or the trust in your own senses and the general sense of it, what makes you to trust the whole thing? Because there are a lot of people involved, even if you trust them, right?
Yeah, sure. So we try to go to Mexico like twice a year, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, plus minus, but like I think that's like what we're trying to achieve, just to like be present and like meet some people as well, and see like what's actually going on as well, and like try to go like maybe like also like a bit like off the beaten track and go like in different areas where not everyone travels to. And then in terms of how to build the trust and who to work with, I mean, I think it's a lot about human connections and trying to like, I mean, like now we're like doing this since like quite a while. So we're doing it since 3.5 years, maybe with like pre-preparation, like 4 years. So we had a decent amount of time to meet people and get like really like build this like agave community in London, and like get to know who is involved and who is doing what and how are they talking about it. And I mean, obviously you have a couple of times you're like, you think, oh, these guys are doing really well. And then after 2 years, you think, maybe it's actually a bit like questionable and like maybe not as great as I thought in the beginning. But yeah, so you're spending a lot of time together. And I think London has a great, it's a quite small one, but it has an amazing agave community. There are quite a few brands, which like I think is always like really fascinating and really surprising. Quite a few brands based in London, or where the owners are based in London, or the people behind it are based in London. Some are better, some are worse, but it's all just like really interesting because it's built this community of all like people who care about agave spirits, and care about like the true meaning of it. And yeah, then it's just basically like, I mean, like what you do as a bartender, right? You like meet people and try to read them, and like sometimes it works out and sometimes not. But I think like in general, you like as a bartender, you're meeting a lot of people, so you're definitely quite well equipped to help you reading them and try to understand what they're actually doing.
You have that skill in a way.
Yes, and like it doesn't work every time. I can't promise that, but I think by now we made ourselves quite a good name, and we made a lot of connections, and we met a lot of people, and it's I think also, I mean, we tasted a lot of liquid. And I think in most cases you can tell already from just like someone like sends you an email and you click on their website, you already have a strong feeling of like, is this going to be something good? Is it something not good? And then obviously you have like these days you have quite like a strong like internet network when it comes to agave spirits as well, right? You can like look on like mezcal reviews, or like, I don't know, some like forums or whatever, and see like who else did someone talk about it already, and like maybe like it's like the brand is available in the US, or which other mezcaleros they're working with, who else are they working with, and so on, like where the village is, and you kind of like know the places, right? You know what's going on, and then you can connect the dots. And I think without any guarantee, but I think we got quite good at like finding out what's actually really happening, and if this brand is worth it or not, or if it's true what they're trying to sell us here right now.
And why is because I mean, as I don't drink much, but mezcal is something that is really special. It's my favorite drink. And why is so special? Are we exoticizing this? Is the smokiness? Is the story behind it? Because it feels, I mean, apart from being a spirit, it feels like it has this medicinal effect in your body. It's really unique in those terms. So how would you describe it? And why do you think, apart from the trend, so many people are, I don't know, just having this unique experience with mezcal?
I think, I mean, it's a very natural product. So really well-made mezcal and a like traditionally made mezcal, right? You have like this. It's pretty much just the agave and water and nothing else. There's no yeast added. There's no like additives added. There's like even the water that you're using is basically just during the fermentation and like not even afterwards. So it's just like it's a very natural product. So there's no like weird stuff that like makes you feel bad or makes you like gives you like a weird headache or hangover or whatever after. I think at the same time, what makes definitely a difference. So if you sit down with a friend and you have like a bottle of, I don't know, scotch on the table, I think I'm going to have like 2 glasses and then I'll probably go to drink something else. Just like, I don't know, I don't think I'm going to feel like drinking half a bottle of scotch by myself or with a friend. While if you have a bottle of mezcal on the table, it's definitely a different drinking experience. And it's, for whatever reason, and I can't give you the scientific reason behind it, it's just, but it's very, very, it's quite easy to drink like a second, a third, and a fourth glass of mezcal.
Yeah.
Which I think, I mean, that's like, which makes it so amazing as well. I think like mezcal is like, it's like a true like community and community spirit that like, it needs to be shared. I think there's not really a point in like, if you get like a special bottle of mezcal that like I only get 1 bottle, I mean like I'm not going to keep it on the shelf forever. Maybe let's open it and give it like to people who appreciate it. I don't give it to like everyone. Or if you come in and like then if you like order like, I'm not going to serve you like if I only have 1 bottle of it and it's truly special, I give you like, and here it's like single shots, so it's like basically an ounce. So I'm going to give you an ounce. I'm not going to give you half the bottle to drink by yourself because I want to share it with other people as well. But it's like you want to share it. You want to like share this like special experience, this special bottle, this special flavor with as many people as possible. And I think that's like, yes, I think it's just like the flavor is really interesting, but I think what really makes the big difference is like the story behind it. And there is a true story behind every single mezcal and every single agave product and every single mezcalero. There's like, it's not like a mass-produced product where like, okay, it's like this gin and we're getting juniper from, I don't know, Slovenia, and we're getting lemon from Sicily. And like, I mean, yeah, whatever. Like, I mean, and you're using natural grain spirit and redistill it. It's like, I mean, that's like a really unromantic story. It's like, it's actually a real product made by real people to share with your friends. And it's every year is different and every batch is different. And you have like insane differences. And like, it's still like pretty much impossible to understand where those differences come from, but that makes it even more fascinating and amazing and delicious in the end.
Yeah.
So for the 6 bottles you guys collabed on with Sin Gusano, right?
Correct, yes.
So tell me about Sin Gusano. What exactly is that project? Who started it? What exactly are they doing?
So Sin Gusano is a brand that's owned by John Darby. He is based in London, and I think he got into agave spirits a bit earlier than us, but is in a way like very much aligned with what we do, and like has probably like a similar like in terms of how much he learned about it and like how he sees it is like, I think his path was very, very similar to ours. How it developed over the last 3 or 4 years. He actually just got married in Oaxaca to a woman from Oaxaca. That's like, I think it just showcases how much he connected with the country, and like he spends probably like 80% of his year in Oaxaca. And he built a brand, I think like 5-6 years ago he started, that he was in Mexico and like he got into mezcal and then he bought like small batches. Like I think like quite like similar to lots of other people do it as well, right? Like buys like small batches, brings them back home, shares it with friends, and like they say like, man, that's like mind-blowing stuff. And then he thought, okay, like I actually don't want to do what I'm doing here, right? Like I don't give up my career. I want to do something different. I want to like highlight those people. And then he built a brand called Sin Gusano, where he, in the beginning, it was focused on Oaxaca, where he bought like, but they always kind of like focused on communities that are not that well explored, that are not that well known. and bought like 20 liters, 30 liters, took it back home, and then he started like a mezcal subscription service. So he basically could sign up on his website. You get bottles, and then every 2 months you get like 2 new releases sent to your house with like. But I think what made it really special is that you got like a ton of information. And if I say it's a ton of information, it's like the amount of information is insane. You get like literally like a 3 A4 pages or something of like information about like who is the producer, what are his children doing, what is his grandma doing. It was a cow walking past the fermentation bed while I was there. He's spending real like days with them and like exploring what they're doing and going harvesting with them, going doing fermentation, doing the distillation, and like really exploring what these guys are doing. And then takes lots of pictures and really shares those stories. And over the last years, he focused much more on like states outside of Oaxaca as well. So he went a lot to Puebla, but then he recently went a lot to Durango and San Luis Potosi. I think he was in Michoacan as well, which is quite great because like in the UK, it's quite difficult to find lots of agave spirits from Durango or Michoacan and so on. And so we have like quite a long-standing relationship. Since we opened, we worked a lot with him. So we like every time he has like a new release, he sent it to us for us to try. Every time he was in Mexico, he got like lots of samples, come over and shared those stories. And then like going back to like the earlier question, that's like how we build a trust as well, because we saw, okay, he really values what we are valuing, and he is like really trying to connect as much as possible with those people, and like not just going there and buying as much as possible from them by buying like what is right for them to sell to him. So like if they make 70 liters and they say, I want to keep like 30 liters for my family and friends, and he said, okay, then buy 40 liters. Or if they say, I can't sell this one, but maybe the next one, then he like comes again and see like what's happening then. But I think like the way how he communicates it and the way how he shares it is like the point that sets him apart from lots of other brands, because it's not just, it's on the label as well, but it's like also like you go to his website and you find like an insane amount of information and like really in-depth analysis of like what's going on in this particular palenque and why this still is different to the still in like the next village, and what are specialties about this specific agave and how it's different to like the same variety but in a different state or in a different area of the state. And now I lost track of like what you actually asked, but I think it was about how what is Sin Gusano and what they're doing.
About
so basically,
Sin Gusano.
Yeah. That's how we connected, and then it was, I think, pretty clear for us that when we want to release the next batch of mezcals, that we want to do it together with John, just because he was like our strongest partner in that sense, in sense of like that what he's doing is very close to what we are doing. And that's the story. And like he's still doing this mezcal subscription service mostly, but now he's also supplying the Kol house mezcals, which is incredible. And I think for both of us, it's a really great opportunity, because I don't have the chance to spend 80% of my year in Mexico and source mezcals. So it was really important to find a partner that we trust and a partner that has the same values, and that we found in him. And at the same time for him as well, it's probably not the worst to be in a restaurant like Kol, in a Kol Mezcaleria, and has like a bit like a different audience as well, and just like shared with as many people as possible.
So I imagine when you guys decided to make a partnership, to collab on this, he probably brought you tons of different mezcals to try. Like, how did you kind of settle on these 6? And also, are these like just for the Mezcaleria, just for Kol, or are they going to be sold commercially as well?
They're going to be, for the moment, just in Kol and the Mezcaleria. So we had requests to have them like available in retail as well, or like in other wholesalers. But we decided that we just want to have it as an exclusive thing for Kol. You can come to Kol and you can buy a bottle as well, but we decided to not want to have them in other stores and shops. maybe like later down the road. But for the time being, we're going to keep it like as an exclusive thing just for us. Yeah, he basically came when we met like around like a year ago, first time. And yeah, he came in with like, I don't know, 60 samples, 70 samples from like all the different states, all the different regions. And then we tasted them together. And I mean, there were like, again, like, right, there are like some that I like more and some that I like less. But they were all like true mezcals based on what we think mezcal should represent, and like truly like delicious liquids. And then we basically, from like writing down flavor profiles to like looking at like where are those located and how we would be able to also connect those in like a mezcal pairing or a mezcal flight, and at the same time trying to showcase as many states as possible, as many different production methods as possible, and like, yeah, just like how to create I mean, obviously it's only 6 mezcals, so you have to be like, you can't showcase everything, but like a small but really well curated selection as good as possible. And basically what we ended up with having is, so we have a Salmiana from San Luis Potosi, which was kind of like quite important for us because we used a lot of Salmiana from San Luis Potosi before. I think it's an amazing mezcal, is an amazing agave to start your mezcal journey with, because it's quite surprising for most guests. It's really, really different to what you would expect. So if you do like mezcal flights, we're using those a lot. I think it pairs amazingly with food as well. It's great in cocktails, and like quite like a special agave and state as well. And like you can straight away dive into this discussion about like what's tequila, what's mezcal, and what are the differences as well. I think there's like really strong connection. Then we have one from Jalisco, which is an ensemble out of 3 agaves. And again, with the background of like, okay, we can have this discussion about tequila and mezcal. It's super floral. It's quite like a bit like vegetal as well. And just like really, really different to the other one. Then we have an ensemble from San Luis Amatlan. That's actually, so it's the producer is called Nicolas Gutierrez. It's probably John's favorite producer of all time, where he buys like lots of batches from. And I think what's quite special about that one is that San Luis Amatlan for me is quite like a special village, because there's like really special flavor and sense of terroir. So like it doesn't really matter the type of agave they use, and it doesn't really matter who in the village produced it, but like all the mezcals always taste quite similarly. So they have like really like strong sense of terroir, which we thought is like super, super interesting. And it's like a really full-bodied, rich, super funky mezcal, so extremely different to the first two, are much more on the lighter, floral, citrusy side. Then we have 2 mezcals who are actually from the same producer, from the same village, made in the same way, from Puebla, right at the border to Oaxaca. It's 2 times, so it's agave marmorata, which in Oaxaca would be called probably tepestate. And what we try to do with those is that we basically have, it's the same, everything is the same besides the time of harvest. So one is harvested in April and one is harvested in August. So you have one time a dry season and one time wet season, with the idea to showcase the differences in between those 2 seasons, and what like how water content in season influences flavor. And I think it's super interesting because first, not many people have ever tasted something like that, and not many other brands ever did something like that. And it's just like super difficult to find in general. And then as well, it was like, it's quite like a lactic mezcal, both of them, just like then going like, they're quite similar, but also really different. Again, like with like a really different flavor profile to the other 3. And that was actually the only single variety, truly single variety mezcals that we have in our range. And then the last one is from Chichicapan in Oaxaca, so quite like well-known village, really like well-established. Obviously, like Del Maguey has like quite a well-known mezcal coming from there. So like lots of people in the mezcal world know the village, and we have, but it's quite a very, very different mezcal that we have from there. That like, and I said it before a few times, that in like when we did the first tastings, that we would have never stocked 3.5 years ago. If you would have given it to me 3.5 years ago, I would have said, that's like super gimmicky. That's not true mezcal. That's like, why would you sell that? That's just like destroying what mezcal is, and like blah blah blah. And so basically what it is they call it a field blend. So they're using pretty much whatever agave they have left, distill it, and then they do a second distillation, adding lemongrass to it, which is on the one side, as if you like an agave mezcal purist, you say like first like that's not true mezcal, but on the other side, it's what's truly happening in Mexico. It's what's truly happening, what's like truly has been done by this mezcalero. So who am I to say, that's not mezcal? And it has been done by their family since like generations already. And second, it's super delicious. And third, again, we can start this discussion about, what is mezcal actually? And like, yes, you can't call it mezcal. You wouldn't be able to certify it as mezcal, but I still think it's valid to call it mezcal. And then you can have a discussion again about and talk about certification processes and what's actually like, what is mezcal and what is not mezcal, and why some producers stay away from it, and so on. And have again, a super different flavor profile as well. And the lemongrass is so well integrated into it. So you really get like this agave backbone and the agave structure and body. But then the lemongrass gives like a bit of like a kick and like a freshness to it, which I never had anywhere else before. And so when we selected them, the idea was to really have like lots of stories behind it, try to showcase like lots of different styles, and be able to put as much information as possible into 6 different mezcals and give you like a really strong overview over the whole category.
Yeah, it's this ongoing question about the boundaries between tradition and innovation, right? That's what you're facing when asking these questions and having those debates, which are pretty interesting anyway. But so do you, in which other countries mezcal is being made right now? You mentioned South Africa. And do you notice a difference with the ones made in Mexico? How do you go about those other ones? How common it is?
So as we mentioned before, South Africa has a couple of agave brands. I had one from India as well. I recently was in Australia and got a bottle from there as well. I think. Wait, then I had one from. I think.
Are they allowed to be called mezcal?
No. That's agave spirits.
Yeah, just agave.
I think I had one from Ecuador. I heard about one from Peru, but I haven't tried it yet.
Yeah, there's one from Peru that's pretty good. Agave de los Andes. I've had it.
Yes,
it's good. Yeah, it's nice.
So there are quite a few that are great, and there are quite a few that are not so great. I think most of them are usually based on agave americana or blue Weber agave, just because they're like easier to like plant and are just healthier and like a bit more like easier to like survive in different climates and different regions as well. I have to say, for example, the one we had from Australia was super interesting, and like, so they basically, I haven't tried like all of their variations, but they made a pichuga with kangaroo, which I thought was quite funny in a way, because it was like in the end like a true expression of like what mezcal or agave spirits would look like in Australia. So they have it wasn't based on Americana, it was based on Espadin, but it was quite interesting because the Espadin looks a bit like Kavinsky, so it's much narrower and longer. And they made a pechuga out of it with kangaroo, and like it was like much less fresh as pechugas you would get from Oaxaca. So like they probably put like much less like orange and like citrus fruits in it, but you had like crazy complexity and really good body, and it was a good mezcal. It wasn't like my favorite mezcal of all time, but it was definitely like up there. It was a great mezcal. At the same time, we had one from South Africa, which I think was really, really good as well and really interesting. And yeah, what we're trying to do, like, is that we're trying to showcase those spirits as well, because I think it's definitely a way into the future of agave spirits. I think we all know that, especially what we said earlier, like Oaxaca, it's getting quite difficult with like monoculture and the just like quantity of agave available as well. And obviously there are lots of other states in Mexico where you can get agaves and where you can make agave spirits. But at the same time, I think it's really interesting to see what's happening in other countries. And just because we're called a mezcaleria, I see it much more mezcal as like the not the definition by history and not definition by legal and by law. So, and by history was like, okay, it was a distillate of agave, and that was called mezcal. And like, I think it's super interesting to see what's happening in other states and what's happening in other countries. And if it's made well, there's definitely a reason and a place for it. And then I also like to showcase it. And like, I think it's a lot about like, just like fueling this discussion and like talking about it and showcasing it. And like, there's so much more still to learn, but also so much to explore and so much for agave to go into. So we want to be part of this progress.
But before we go, I wanted to make sure I asked you about this, because I know Kol, like I had Santiago on like a year or two ago. I don't know, but but there's this kind of strict policy of only importing, just a few ingredients, like corn, chiles, and what else, like chocolate or something.
Mm-hmm.
Does that policy apply to the bar, to the mezcaleria as well?
It does. Obviously not when it comes to spirits. Then it would be quite a sad mezcaleria if you would only have mezcals from the UK, because we wouldn't have any. Even though you have a bit of agaves growing in England, not much. But if you go to the coast, if for example I just saw like last year was for a week or two in Cornwall, and I think there's like a 40-year-old agave americana growing there. It's incredible. And like just the other day, one of my bartenders sent me a picture of like somewhere here in East London was like a massive agave that was like basically blooming right now, like a massive Kyoto, which is was incredible. But yeah, obviously you don't have the quantity, and
it's probably like the botanical garden or something. You're just gonna have to sneak in at night and like cut it down.
Yeah. Actually, there's a story of Kew Gardens. It's quite a big botanical garden, and they used to. I think it was actually Ivan Saldana from Montelobos. He was studying in the UK, and then I might be wrong, but he definitely planted some agaves. I'm not sure if he was the one who planted them in Kew Gardens, but I think he definitely planted some agaves in the UK in some botanical gardens. But there is an agave in Kew Gardens, and a few years ago, because they didn't really know what agaves are doing, the agave was then like growing the Kyoto, and the Kyoto grew like by like half a meter a day. And basically, suddenly overnight, it went through the roof and destroyed the glass. And the workers came in the morning, and there was a hole in the roof. There was a hole in the ceiling, and the agave had shot through, or the Kyoto had shot through. But yeah, obviously, it doesn't, like, our rules apply in the mezcaleria as well, but it doesn't apply for agave spirits. But yes, everything else that we're using, we are getting from the UK. So all the fresh ingredients coming from the UK. So we don't use lime, we don't use lemon, we don't use grapefruit, we don't use avocados or any tropical fruits. So we're mixing British ingredients with Mexican spirits and trying to like replicate flavors with like different techniques. And just showcase spirits and showcase Mexican culture in that way.
Yeah.
What have you found? Go ahead, Juliana.
Yeah, no, I was going to ask Matthias about that, the way of mixing mezcal or agave spirits with local ingredients, right? And I mean, we could spend months here of you teaching us in every case what to do and what not to do, but I'm just very curious about how do you decide what works, what doesn't work, if you have a few rules for that, because obviously it's a very different, or is not a different, terroir and environment. So if you can tell us a bit about that, that would be great.
You know, I first think that similar to if you like spirits, I think there is a mezcal for you as well. I think if you have ingredients and you know how to extract their flavor, you can find a mezcal that works with them, because mezcal, the world of mezcal and the world of agave spirits is so diverse that you get, like, as we said, from big flavor, full on smoky, rich, to quite elegant citrusy, to like maybe spicy, herbaceous. You have like lots of different flavor profiles that you can work with in the world of agave already. And then in the world of British ingredients, we obviously have a lot of like things like apples and pears, but then we have a lot of wild ingredients as well. We have a lot of flowers. They might be a bit more difficult to extract the flavor. But as soon as you learn a little bit how to do that, it can get like really, really interesting. And at the same time, there are lots of ingredients that can taste quite tropical if you like modify them a little bit. If you use them maybe unripe, or if you use them overripe, or if you pickle or ferment them, or blend all the three together, and then get like basically like, for example, out of squash, a very, very different, almost like mango-esque flavor profile. But it's basically just unripe squash and pickled squash. And things like that, obviously it takes a lot of time and it takes a lot of research. And I really believe that basically what we're doing at Kol, and also what we're doing in the Mezcaleria, will get better and better with every year, just because we learn much more about it. And like quite often seasonality is like super, super short. So you get something in, and until you have like experimented and tried it out, like basically you can't get the ingredient anymore. But then you document it, and next year and it's like, great, amazing. We have these 2 weeks in April, and this is like the ingredient pineapple wheat we get in like June. And seasonality is quite short, but we know if we extracted this in this way, we can use it as like almost like tropical pineapple-esque flavor, and it's going to work really, really well in drinks. And then we have it like prepared already for the next seasons, and we know about it already. And that's why I think with every year it's going to go like stronger and stronger, because we know more, because we're not only learning about agave spirits, but we're learning a lot about British ingredients as well, and especially like wild ingredients and flowers and plants and leaves. Leaves are incredible. Leaves are like, you have like so many flavorful leaves that I probably never thought about using before. But now it's like, oh, you use like, I don't know, there's like meadowsweet. Meadowsweet leaves taste like watermelon if you like cold extract them. Fig leaves taste like coconut and things like that. So you can get a lot of tropical flavors. You get a lot of like flavors similar to how they are in Mexico. It takes you much more time, and it's like they're not like the natural way to get there. It's not necessarily the easy way, but then it's like much more fascinating. Or like things like meadowsweet taste like tonka and vanilla. So we don't use tonka and vanilla, but then we're using meadowsweet instead. And we made like, for example, as like, I think a quite simple but an easy to understand example is like the carajillo. Carajillo is like the really well-known drink in Mexico and like really, really popular in Mexico. But we didn't want to use liqueur 43. I don't think it fits like with like what we do in our bar. But also I thought we can like do much better. So we basically made our own type of liqueur 43 in a quite simple way. So we used meadowsweet, which has like lots of like caramelly, tonka, vanilla notes, and we mixed it with mezcal and made like basically like a mezcal meadowsweet liqueur. And that replicated what like liqueur 43 would do in a carajillo. And then we getting one of the ingredients that we dry ingredients we're getting from outside of the UK. So obviously coffee we're getting from outside the UK, because also it doesn't grow here. So we're getting a coffee from Oaxaca, and then you can make like a truly Mexican British ingredient based Carajillo, and it tastes incredible. And I think it tastes actually much, much better than any other Carajillo you would get with liqueur 43.
You mentioned pineapple weed. I'm just curious because I just collected some the other day actually.
Ah, amazing.
Yeah, but that's a fascinating ingredient. I have seen it everywhere. Like I wrote a book with the chef in Iceland. He uses a lot of it. But I've seen pineapple weed growing all over New York. I've seen it in Patagonia. It's something that's like worldwide, and it's like in the most unlikeliest places you get this very tropical pineapple flavor. How do you use it exactly? I'm just curious.
We're using it a lot in vinegars, so infusing it into vinegar, but we're also making quite a lot of tinctures based on it. So we are using quite high proof alcohol, so like 96% or so. Like that would be how do you call it in these states? Is it Everclear? Everclear? Is it a thing? I think like basically like as high proof as possible, and then
Yeah. Elixir, tincture, whatever.
Yeah, and then infusing it over like a week or two, and it gets like a super like incredible bright green color. Like basically it's like a room temperature infusion over like 10 to 14 days. So you have to like taste it a couple of times so it doesn't get bitter. And then you can use it basically almost like in drops in drinks or like in milligrams in drinks. And there you get like a lot of like, depending a bit when you harvest the pineapple weed. So I think like for me personally, so you were able to get like pineapple weed already like 3 weeks ago or so in the UK, but it was much more like chamomile, obviously, but like because it's a part of the chamomile family, but then like also quite like appley. And I think a bit later in the season, it gets like much more like pineapple actually. So it depends a little bit when you harvest it, but I think extracting the flavor through alcohol works really well, but at the same time extracting through vinegar works also quite well. So that's what they're doing in the kitchen quite often, making like a pineapple weed vinegar. But then at the same time, I could imagine, I haven't tried it yet, but just guessing because I know that cold extraction with acidic liquid works quite well. So I could, for example, like verjus. Verjus is like a unripe grape juice. So I could imagine that like infusing it into verjus could work quite well as well. The only down point is that like maybe like your shelf life is going to be a bit shorter than obviously with alcohol or with vinegar. But yes, like relatively simple techniques actually. It might be interesting to try distilling it as well, to maybe get like more of these like floral notes out of it. But yeah, like making tinctures work really, really well for us, and we have a drink with it on the menu currently.
Cool. You mentioned verjus. Like you're actually importing it, right? Like I read that somewhere.
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
So basically, verjus is like unripe grape juice. So like basically it's like almost like a waste product in a way. So because during the grape harvest or during like in vineyards, you in like around like May, June, you cut off some grapes to give the rest of the grapes more space to grow. And these unripe grapes that you basically cut off, you collect and then you juice them, and they have like this really tart, sour, really acidic flavor, but like at the same time super, super fruity, and has like always traditionally been used instead of like in like old Rome, and like in lots of like Roman recipes, you find it instead of lime juice or lemon juice. And it's quite like it's like almost like a Northern European or Central European source of acidity that now more and more is used again in cooking, but also in drinks. And I think quite often, like outside of the cold world as well, I think in general, if you have like lots of bars, like basically automatically go for like lemon or lime as like a source of acidity, but there are lots of other sources of acidity as well. Like, is it verjus, but like also like things like kombuchas and things like that. And I think quite often, if you use lemon or lime, it's a very overpowering, very powerful flavor. And maybe it makes much more sense to go with something like quite like fruity aromatic, but it's as acidic as lime juice, like verjus, because it's much more harmonious with like the other components and flavors of the drink. At the same time, it's just like it's just like a local form of acidity, and at the same time it's a waste product. So it's like, it's why not use it? It's an amazing product.
Yeah, I mean, it's around, it's abundant, you know, in
Exactly.
Southern Europe, I'm sure.
And otherwise it would have been thrown away. So even better.
Yeah, we're running out of time, but Juliana, are there any other questions you really wanted to ask?
No, I just think it's a beautiful work, and it's pure alchemy, right? What you're doing, apart from all the sociological work behind it and the importance of producers. And we could go on the politics of mezcal production. We don't have time for that right now, but I think that alchemy of mixing these different mezcals and agaves with what you were saying, the way in which you are going about local ingredients is beautiful. I'm looking forward to trying that one day.
Yes, you should come. You have to come over.
Yeah.
Yes, I think it's now it's. I think it's also going back to like the agave topic. It's a really accessible way for guests to explore mezcals, and like maybe you're not that comfortable with like going into a bar and ordering straight spirits, but you sit down and like cocktails is a much more approachable thing. So you have like one or two, but they're all based on different agaves and different variations and different brands. And then you start like chatting, and it's like, okay, like now I don't know this Espadín from Oaxaca, but I also had the Cupriata from Guerrero. So maybe like, why don't you like want to try them neat, or like why don't you want to try like something else? And like you start like this conversation, and then you're like, I think it's quite an interesting and different way of getting people to be interested in agave spirits, besides like obviously like for people who had it before and want to try it neat. And just like showcasing it in different ways and as much as possible.
Ooh, one more thing before we go. You guys are opening another restaurant, right? Fonda. Is there going to be a bar program at that as well?
Yes, yeah, it's actually quite going to be quite cocktail focused. So we're opening Fonda in September in London as well, in Mayfair, so quite close to where Kol is. Bit more fun, bit more maybe approachable. It's going to be a la carte and not a tasting menu. Bit bigger. We have an outside space as well, but then the drinks list is going to be quite heavily focused on cocktails. Lots of palomas, lots of micheladas, but then also like a range of like classics, and again like quite around Mexican spirits as well. So not, what we didn't talk about at Kol is like besides mezcal, we're also trying to use like Mexican whiskeys, Mexican rums, and so on. So like similar what we're going to do at Fonda. And we're going to have a house range of Fonda mezcals as well. So we're going to have 4 Fonda mezcals. So like house mezcals for there. And then we're not going to have like a dedicated bar. So they're not going to be a mezcaleria, but like we have like a nice, really well curated mezcal selection and tequila selection there as well. And lots of fun with agave spirits and Mexican food, cocktails. And it's really, really exciting. We're working on the drinks for it right now, and we're putting the spirits list together as well. And we just designed the labels, so there's lots to come.
What are you going to mix the palomas with?
You mean
like will it be grapefruit? You can't use grapefruit, can you? All right.
So for example, we're using a lot of rhubarb.
Okay.
So rhubarb works quite well because it has like this like zinginess as well. At the same time, like super like nice like fruity profile as well. We're using pine, so we have like making like a pine soda, which like gives like a lot of like citrusy and freshness. Those things work really, really well.
Cool. That sounds awesome. Well, thank you, Matthias. It was a pleasure speaking with you. Thanks for kind of sharing your passion with mezcal and agave, and I'll get to Kol sometime. Like I keep like running into Santiago or somebody else that works there in every other part of the world, but for some reason I haven't been to London since you guys opened. But one day,
yeah, you have to come around. Yeah, no, thank you very much. Thanks for having me. It was really fun. It's like best thing in the world, like sitting together and talking about agave spirits. yeah, let me know when you're around. Would love to have you down there. Or if not,
Yeah.
we catch up in New York or Los Angeles or wherever we meet.
Somewhere. Thank you so
Mexico.
much. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah,
Mexico.
Thank
Mexico.
you. My pleasure. Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you. Have
Thanks.
a nice
See ya.
evening.
You too. You too. And you have a nice day.
Okay.